I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you could make your own Wikidata setup for your own company or institution, or even just for your own personal use. So the general idea behind this workshop, when we originally thought about it, was that we would let everybody in the room follow along on their laptops and set up their own Wikibase as we go, which we can do. But looking around the room, it seems like perhaps there are only 2 people with laptops here. I guess that's the case. None of you guys brought laptops and wanted to have a go following along at the same time? Or not? No, it's absolutely fine if that's not the case. So I think what I'll then instead do is I will use how to set up your own Wikibase as a way to discuss with you what the infrastructure that has to be put together to generate the stuff that Amir showed you looks like, if that seems like it's interesting to you. That'll be the general outline of the talk. Just so you know, my name's Tom. As you can tell, I don't speak any Armenian. This is my first time in Armenia. So if there's a problem with understanding my rather quick English, then just put your hand up or just shout at me, whatever, and hopefully we can clarify things, because I know I talk quite quickly, and perhaps not as clearly as would be helpful. But yeah, we have this setup for hosting your own Wikibase, which effectively allows you to run your own version of wikidata.org. It's free and open source software, so all the code that you might need to run it is publicly available. It's mirrored to GitHub. We don't actually do all our development work on GitHub, but yeah, the actual code can be downloaded from there. It's based on MediaWiki, which is the same thing that's the backend for Wikipedia. So Amir and I work for Wikimedia Germany, which is part of this international international movement, of which we're one chapter. And yeah, we're the people that run the software and the servers that power Wikipedia, basically. And this is another sister project to it. You have a question, or no? No? Yeah, shout out at me if you have a question or whatever. Cool. And that means that the hello. Yeah, that means that the main software stack is PHP. So MediaWiki is this PHP application, so a bit like WordPress or something like that. And basically, the very simple way of thinking about it is it's just a PHP web app with some database behind it. And our production case, we have MariaDB behind it. And that's also what we would do if we wanted to set up our own. But in addition to having this PHP web app, there are some lots of tools and services that have gradually built up around it that are kind of part of the feature set. So without those tools and services, it's quite difficult to be productive. And one of those tools particularly that you saw in the last talk, and you will have seen if you came to our talk before, is the Wikidata query service. So that's this, basically what Amir was showing you the whole of the last session, which is a graph database which allows you to ask questions to the data set that you have, in this case on wikidata.org, but in your case could be for your own data. And that's not built into Wikibase for free. That's another service that we run alongside it. And what happens is that service is constantly checking your Wikibase installation to see when users or yourself have made changes or edits. And then it downloads those edits to the service. And after, there's some small lag, maybe 10 seconds or something. And at that point, those changes are then available to be queried and searched for. And that's generally how the query service is stuck together. For the demo we were going to stick together and show off today, we're quite happy that we've got some Docker images. I don't know, does anyone in here know what Docker is? Alexei knows Docker? Yeah, stick your hands up if you've heard of Docker. Right, so most of you haven't heard of Docker. Okay, so Docker is a platform for packaging up services or applications into quite easy portable bundles, and it's becoming very trendy to stick your application in these things. And then there are other programs on top of Docker that let you stick these applications together to build a complete service. So one fairly simple one of these is called Docker Compose. Maybe you also heard about some other container platforms like Kubernetes and things. It's very trendy at the moment, and like it's a big Google project that everyone's pushing. And that's how we've made our software available for random non-professional users to set up at quite low cost to themselves and figure out if it might be useful for their institution or for even just for their private business case. And the reason you might want to do that could be because you have data that is private to you, it's proprietary data, and you don't want to put it on wikidata.org, but you still want to be able to use it internally in your company. Or it might be that you have information that you would like to make publicly available, but say the licensing conditions of your data don't match the licensing conditions of wikidata.org. So if you put any information on wikidata.org, it's nice because all the information on there is CC0, which is great because it means that you can then build whatever apps you want with it, and there's no chance of there being any cost. But if you maybe are working for a museum and you have a licensing agreement with, I don't know, your state or whoever to get some media or some information, and that's not CC0 licensed, then it might be that the only option you have to make that publicly available is under a more restrictive license than CC0, in which case it might be good for you to host that data on your own Wikibase where you can control how you license it. And the good thing is that we're gradually building up more Wikibases than just Wikidata. And there's even a Wikibase of Wikibases. So this is like a database connecting all of the different Wikibases together. And that means that you can make links from Wikidata to another Wikibase, which maybe has more detailed information or restricted information that you couldn't publish under the original thing, under the original licensing of wikidata.org. I'm guessing some other reasons that you might want to use it particularly is if you have a very detailed data set that really wouldn't match what's going on wikidata.org. So for example, we find this with museums, for example, that have museum catalogs and they want to make items about every single artifact in their museum. Maybe they have 10 million items in their museum. This would probably be too much for wikidata.org, and it wouldn't be possible for the community there to curate all that information. So in that case, again, you'd probably want your own, and then key artifacts, you might want to have an item on wikidata.org about, which would then link out to your Wikibase, where you could show off your own pictures, metadata, whatever you have about that item. That's just a motivation for why you might want to do it, and I quickly explained to you how with Docker and Docker Compose you can these containers can be packaged, and it's not how we do it in production at the Wikimedia Foundation for wikidata.org. We have a very complicated infrastructure there, mostly on actual bare metal servers is how everything's running, because it has to be optimized because obviously some of the bits of Wikidata are used on Wikipedia, which you probably know is the 5th biggest website or whatever in the world, so we get loads of traffic. So just using these little Docker images wouldn't necessarily be good for a large production site, but they're great for understanding how everything sticks together, and also very useful for putting up a small example you might want to do. You could put this on any random hosting provider. You could stick this on AWS, on Google Cloud. There's all these kind of things. You can just stick containers on there and follow the pattern which I'm about to talk you through to wire them all together. This is the key URL if you want to follow this along. Feel free to copy it down. There's no short URL, I'm sorry, but it's pretty easy. It's just GitHub, and then Wikimedia Germany, which is where Amir and I work, and then Wikibase Docker. And all the Docker images are in this one repository. Not all the code for all of them, but all the Docker files and this kind of stuff. And there's quite, I think, reasonable set of documentation on there that you can follow along to figure out how to rig up this thing yourself. And we're just going to talk through a little bit of that documentation, not exhaustively because I only have a half-hour slot and I'm not going to try and run into the next speaker's time. Once you've gone there, the easiest thing to do is pretty much just pull that repo. You don't actually need absolutely all the files in there, but it will let you build them from scratch, the images from scratch, and customize them if you want to too. But the key thing in there is there's a Docker Compose file, and so it should be the case that if you already have a recent community edition of Docker installed, and Docker Compose, then this is like one command and you get the whole setup ready to go. Nice clean Wikibase, plus all these associated services stuck onto it, which I'll talk about in a second. I'm going to just take you over to the Git repo and just show you what it looks like in the README, because I can see that it's all a bit abstract if you're not following along on your laptop. You can see I go here a lot. Cool. I hope this is readable to you. How's it for people at the back? Yeah, it's readable still? Yeah, great. So you've got these Docker images, and there's actually a few more than these when we stick them together, but these are the ones where we've built custom images and you can browse through and see how they all stick together, and I'll just talk you through what each of them does. So this Wikibase image is just that PHP application I told you about at the beginning. So it's based on the official PHP Docker image, and sort of one hierarchy level down, there's an official MediaWiki Docker image, and one level down again is an official Wikibase Docker image. So you can think of Wikibase as like an extension to MediaWiki. The next image that we have is this the query service image. So that's BlazeGraph, which is the back end to the query service that you saw Amir talk about. And that's a fairly famous graph database. It used to be called Big Data. Now it's called BlazeGraph. And maybe if you guys are keen Amazon AWS users, I think the development team has now been bought by Amazon, and they've got a new product coming out called Jupyter, which is effectively the same backend. And I think they're intending to try and continue supporting BlazeGraph as the community edition, and then this Jupyter thing remains the cloud provided paid for service. We use this image in our setup a couple of times. So we have one version of it constantly running, which is the graph database with the index and the store that we're hitting with queries. And we also have another version running, which is this updater. I think I spoke about that a little bit before. So whenever you make a change on your Wikibase, that change needs to come from the PHP app into the query service so that you can then ask questions. And this updater is constantly polling the Wikibase installation, looking at all of the recent changes. If it finds that an item's been changed, it then downloads that whole item, takes down all the triples that are different, and pushes them into the query service. And gives you that continuous update that you need. And if you're running your own, making sure this updater is constantly running is a very important thing to do. You can get in quite a sticky situation if you stop running the updater, because depending on what you're doing, if you're trying to ingest data, if the query service has fallen a long way behind Wikibase, you might be trying to make items, say, that already exist. You have a big data set and you're trying to make sure that an item for Yerevan already exists. If it already exists on Wikibase and that information hasn't yet made it to the query service, it can be quite unfortunate, because you then make another item for Yerevan because you didn't know it existed already, and you then have this disambiguation problem, which can be very unfortunate. So yeah, keeping the updates running is important. These two bits and pieces here are containers which make that pretty UI that you saw Amir showing off. So that's the nice Sparkle editor, which hints to you what to type and where, and allows you to stick in there's magic lines which print it as a pretty graph, or the bubble chart, or all of this stuff. And this is just a JavaScript pile of code. It's not even an app, really. It's not like a Node.js backend or anything. That's being served by Nginx, and this proxy sits between the front end of the query service and the back end of the query service, which means that you can restrict who can write to the back end, but you can allow anyone to read from it, and you sort out all these kind of cross-origin resource problems and things. Finally, the other image that we've built that goes to it, it's this tool called Quick Statements, which is made by the community. So as you can imagine with Wikipedia, we have a lot of community members and people who are interested in writing code. And this is a tool written by a very, very famous Wikimedian called Magnus Mansk, who actually wrote the original version of Wikipedia back in 2001, something like that. Yeah, forever ago, and he's like been around all the time. He's a very impressive PHP hacker who is super prolific, writes code like insanely fast, so it's very cool. And this is a tool which allows you to ingest data into your Wikibase. So you can kind of think of it as a bit like a pipeline. So if you were a library and you wanted to get all your information about some books or whatever into your Wikibase, Quick Statements gives you an Excel-alike UI, you know, like a tabular data format where you can push data in, and then you can put it into the Wikibase. You can browse it on the Wikibase and change it if you need to, tidy it up, make sure everything is how you like it. Then you can wake your laptop up again. Then the query service is kind of that output. So that's probably where you might have users asking questions. It might be where your new mobile app is hitting to try and show off your library's collection for users as they walk around the library or whatever. That's the flow. There are some other containers that we just used from the upstream provider, like out-of-the-box containers that we've not built custom versions for. So we have things like Elasticsearch, which means that when you are searching on MediaWiki, you have like a very efficient, quick, nice full-text search thing, which kind of just works out of the box. Just going to take you down here a little bit further, if I can find my mouse. There you are. Yeah, this explains where it is, and if you run Docker Compose up, then these services will just become available to you with pretty much no configuration at the following URL. So that they come up here. I don't know if any of you are following along. If you are, and you have like problems mid-talk or something, then feel free to shout out, or come and find us at the after party or something, and we can maybe have a look at it for you over a beer. I will, I think, go back to my slides if I can. I think that's possible. Cleverly called Untitled Presentation. Yeah, so these are all of the addresses you can find it. This is where you'll find the plain Wikibase. I'll show you an example of what a fresh Wikibase, not like wikidata.org, looks like in a second. That's quite interesting for you because on wikidata.org, they have quite strict community policies and permissions about, for example, making a new property. If you're managing your own Wikibase, you can do whatever you like, right? You're God in that little environment. So you can make any kind of properties you want, any kind of entities that you want at all, and structure your data in whatever way is most convenient for you, even if that doesn't match the way that the community has decided to structure their data on wikidata.org. Finally, these two here, which I'll just move down to so you can copy them across if you're following along. This is where the query service sits, which you saw loads of with Amir. And finally, this is quick statements. I think I'll show you the local version of Wikibase. You already saw the query service with Amir, so I'm not going to bang on about that again unless people have questions or want to ask any more things. And now I'll quickly show you what quick statements looks like and how, if you were running a Wikibase of your own, you might want to ingest data. I think I'm coming up to like 10 minutes time now, so we'll try and get through that in 5 minutes, then there'll be 5 minutes of Q&A at the end, or questions in the middle if anything's unclear. We hope it works. Yeah, so here you are. Here's like this super blank page. This is just running on my local machine. I set it up about 3 minutes before Amir and I walked in here, rushing in. And yeah, you can see it's very blank. You could obviously customize all of this stuff to look exactly however your institution wanted. So you can whack in like your own logo, your own comments. You can build your own permission system, so if you wanted to, you can have, some users can read, some users can't, some users are administrators, all of this. That kind of just comes out of the box with MediaWiki. If you've used MediaWiki before, you'll know all of these magical things you can do. And yeah, to make new entities, as we call them, so these are items and properties. There are a few other types we mentioned about yesterday, but let's keep it simple today. You go to these special pages, and you scroll down to the bottom, you find Wikibase, and then there are these create new things. So you can create a new property, for example. So I might make a property, and yeah, you can tell I'm a Brit, right? So I've got it hard-coded to British English. But you can hard-code this to Armenian or something that you understand clearly. And I'm going to put in a label for this property. something like a year of foundation. And keep filling this in. You have to watch me type, which is quite embarrassing. And you saw, I guess, in the talk yesterday, or maybe you saw a bit with Amir today, about these terms. So these are just like human readable descriptions, which are multilingual over like this massive set of languages that Wikimedia supports, which I think is very important. We're quite keen to stress that although I'm a British English focused user, we're not focused just on British English, right? We're trying to reach out to the entire community across the world, and in any alphabet, any language. I think that's quite important to all of us. Yeah, I'll check point in time, right? So there are all these data types. I talked a bit about these yesterday. Maybe you can ignore this Commons Media File one. This is like very specific to wikidata.org and linking to the big database of free images we have. But the others you can pretty much entirely use, and I think they're quite self-explanatory, right? So an external identifier might be something like an ISBN number, on the back of a book. All these things, yeah? Or an entry in a protein database or something. Geographic coordinates and geographic shapes are quite obvious too, so you would use those if you wanted to like say, I don't know, where in the museum your artifact you want to show off is, or you wanted to give a shape which surrounded the outline of a famous church in Armenia. Items and properties are these entities which exist on Wikibase, so you can like link from one to another, and that's how this whole graph gets built up. So you can think of these as like hops on the graph, and the others as like endpoints, like final values of data. Monolingual text, we talked about yesterday, is a very simple string. Unicode can be any language, any alphabet, but it's not tied to a language. Whereas this string here, this is like a lingual string. So for example, you might want to store the name of Armenia in Armenian, not a generic thing. It's bound to a single language. Point in time is obvious, quantity is obvious, population, number of hats, whatever it might be. Yeah, URL and tabular data. Again, I think you probably can imagine what this looks like. So I make an item called property called point in time, click create, hope nothing explodes. There we are, so now I have this new property with the thing in English, and I can add other stuff to this. I could add statements to it, describing stuff about it, but what I'm actually going to do in a second is use this to add a statement to an item. So I can describe and I'll show you how you start building up this structure of knowledge. So now we're going to go to create new item, and we're going to stick in the American University of Armenia, and can't type today. Thanks. If I like typo your name or something, I apologize in advance. And yeah, stick in an alias here. Right, create that. And here you are, now you've got a blank thing. And if we wanted to, we could fill in these labels in Armenian. I'm not going to try and do that because I don't have an Armenian keyboard, and I also don't know how to, so sorry. But we can add a statement. So we can use this property here, and we hope this works now, P1, and we can add a year of foundation. And then, does anyone know when this place was founded? It seems pretty new, right? It's like... Okay, cool, yeah. It actually looks way newer than that, right? It's super glossy and shiny. But yeah, we can stick in a time. Oh, whoops. I said 1992. Yeah, so we can put in 1992, 1991. We can have like quite... the precision of these points in time is quite pleasantly automatically inferred. Can people see this? Like here it says precision year, and at the bottom it says calendar Gregorian. So yeah, we also support like all sorts of crazy things to allow you to be very flexible, like different calendar models, different globe shapes for your coordinates if you want to describe where your moon base is or your Mars rover landed. Yeah, save this. And yeah, there you are. Now you have a statement stuck on this thing. And we can then find that.
May I have a question?
Yeah, go for it.
These data types are described in RDFs?
So yeah, it's an interesting structure. So the PHP application stores all of these entities in the back end as really just blobs of JSON. And then there is a fixed format, there's a fixed algorithm to convert these to the RDF triples. Does that make sense?
I mean the data type. You have a data type,
Yeah.
time in point in time.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere described as RDF or it's something in code, in JSON?
Yeah, so this can be exported to RDF. Yeah, it comes out in RDF. And the schema for the Wikibase export format in RDF is also described in RDF. So there is a wikibase.se.
I can look, for example, all the data that has precision from Spark query.
Sure, yeah, you can. I mean, it's probably a very big query, like, not very big, but it's probably like a moderately involved query to write. But yeah, you could find all of the points in time. Well, in fact, these are even a bit more complicated than just all of the points in time, right? Because this is just one statement saying 1991, but this statement can also have references stuck on it. So you can imagine, even just for one statement with 2 or 3 references, this graph can already be like, I don't know, have quite a high connectivity and be quite complex. But yeah, it's totally possible to figure out all of that stuff. Yeah, that's like a very quick introduction to how you could start modeling your data on here. And I think, I didn't see the calendar, but I think I'm like, got 3 minutes. So it would be pretty awesome if I didn't keep running on and you had a chance to ask questions if you have any more other than this guy. Anyone got anything they would like to ask? And what sort of things was I not clear about or skipped over?
I think you had a question about identifiers.
Yeah, I have a question about identifier.
Of course, yeah.
To create identifier for Wikidata. Can I use this localhost as a sandbox?
Yeah, you could use localhost as a sandbox.
And after that, how can I export from this to the main Wikidata?
Right, so there is no real official route to go from your sandbox to Wikidata. People who are doing it are usually writing their own program to do it. Yesterday, we talked a very little bit about what clients are available. I think the most popular one for doing this moving of data from your Wikibase to wikidata.org is called Wikidata Integrator. It's a Python package. And if you're going to do that, then it's very advantageous to think about how you might map onto the Wikidata model in advance. Because your property, your P1, for example, you're going to want to be able to map that to whichever property is on wikidata.org. So the common way to do that is to have a property on your Wikibase called property on wikidata.org. So you can then put on the other properties statements saying, yeah, does that make sense?
Okay, then this one I can use just a sandbox, but whom should I, whose door should I knock out
to move to wikidata.org? Well, in reality, it's like Wikipedia, right? It's publicly editable. You ideally would probably make an account, but you can edit without even making an account to wikidata.org. You just hit the API, which is published. Sorry about that. Probably just like messed the microphone up a bit. Yeah, you don't have to ask anybody. It's good if you're working in an area that other people are storing data in, that you go on wikidata.org and you talk to people who are already curating data in that area so that you agree on the schema for that and you don't tread on each other's toes. Particularly, you want to avoid things like making duplicate items and stuff. You don't want to make like an item that already exists again. That makes sense? Yeah, cool. Far away or am I short?
1 minute.
1 minute. Far away.
And,
Yeah. Oh, I think Lady Hyde had a question.
Thank
Yeah.
you. You said that you keep this data as a JSON, right?
Yeah.
And what about the big content or like articles in Wikipedia, which can be very huge? You keep them as a JSON as well, or?
So if you imagine on Wikipedia, the text articles are stored in Wikitext, which you maybe have seen if you type Wikitext. It's a bit like Markdown, but a bit different. So they're not stored in JSON, they're stored just as the free text. And Wikibase is an extension to be able to store these structured JSON blobs where you would normally put the Wikitext. Does that make sense? But it's still very big, right? Because we store every revision of the JSON entity, and on wikipedia.org, we store every revision of the article. So yeah, these things grow to be big. Yeah. Done?
Your time is up.
Thank you very much. Cheers.